Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Classic Conversations. We might as well start with the overture because, you know, that is what's first. So let me give you a little taste here. And we'll stop there. 1776. There are people sitting out there that know way more about this than I do. I'll be honest about that. But I can tell you it's the only show in Broadway or West End history that I'm aware of that starts with a rudimental snare drum solo. So that's one of the things that sets it apart. I'm Sean Ambrose, and we've got John Dickinson and Stephen Hopkins, thank you, and Samuel Chase. Let's see, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, and Maryland. There we go. And Franklin's hiding in the back because, you know, Franklin. We are excited to share with you a little bit about this show and the upcoming performance that's going to take place Thursday evening at the Cheyenne Civic Center, 7 o'clock. But we'll get to some of those details in a little while. So, 1776 the musical. The concept for this and the beginning ideas was from a man by the name of Richard Sherman. Sherman was born and raised in East Harlem. He was a jazz pianist, a musician, but he also got a degree in history, and he taught in New Jersey, taught history in New Jersey for a little while. But he was mostly active as a pianist. He did a couple minor roles in some Broadway shows early on, and played. And he actually played with. I'm going to get some of this wrong. I think he played with the Tommy Dorsey Band, and he played with a couple of the other big bands of the 40s and 50s. And then he latched onto this idea of creating a musical about the Revolutionary period and specifically around the creation of the Declaration. So he worked on this for quite a while. After he quit teaching, he was doing a lot of reading and playing. He was one of the contract writers at the Brill Building in New York, and you may know a little bit about that one. This was a company that churned out charts, top 40 charts. And jingles. So he wrote tunes for Elvis Presley, and he wrote tunes for other people, and they just had contract writers that they wrote tunes and then farmed them out to various pop artists or stars or whatever. And he got tired of writing rock and roll tunes, so he walked out the door and decided to work on a musical. This show, the other two people that were involved in the creation of the show primarily. So Richard Sherman was the one that wrote the original book, the original lyrics, and the original music. He did all three. And then when he finally found a producer that would bite on this, remember we're talking mid to late 60s, Vietnam War era, other things going on, and he finally found a producer that caught his idea, and that producer felt the need to bring in a new book writer. Someone that was way more familiar with the writing of scripts, both in Hollywood and Broadway and for TV, by the name of Peter Stone. Peter Stone ended up doing a rewrite on the book, and Peter's history is actually quite fascinating. He wrote for lots of shows. He was the one that wrote the script, the screenplay for Charade. And quite a few other shows of that era. He was the president of the Screenwriters Guild of America for many years, and he had done a lot of Broadway rewrites. He was kind of known for fixing other people's not quite right books, as it were. And from everything I've read about him, he was kind of cantankerous as he did so. And some of these guys, you guys feel free to chime in any time. Hold it down for a second to get it on. There we go. Okay, and we should be live. And then the director of the show was Peter Hunt. So, anybody want to chime in on these three creators? The show hit Broadway in 1969 and won Tonys for Best Musical. Sherman Edwards did win a Tony for Best Score or something along that line. I think it was Best Score, and then it has had many revivals over the decades. There was a big tour that went out in 1975-76, not terribly surprising. And then, of course, just 4 years ago now, because it's 2026, there was a revival that some of you may be aware of. It came to Denver that was done with an all-female and or non-binary cast. So it has had many revivals over the years, but its creation, its book and music is very much classic Broadway in its scope, and it is a very orchestral score. So that's what I've got for a moment. Anybody want to chime in on the creation piece or whatever?
One of the interesting things I found is this is such a transitional phase in Broadway. It released the same year as O Calcutta, which is known for taking Broadway in a completely different direction, but then also within a season of Oklahoma.
Right.
So this is very, very traditional, backward from 1969 Broadway compared to the direction that Broadway was going. And you can feel that in the music. It feels like the mid-60s, late 50s Broadway musicals, and some of the songs very much have that feel. But it's interesting that it won as much as it did at the end of that era, moving into some of the more modern 70s and 80s style Broadway.
It also, for those who like to look for these things, has some interesting subplots or sub-messages. 1969, what was going on then? You know, there was a lot of shooting in Southeast Asia. We had 2 political assassinations the previous year. So it was a time when civil rights was still very much, there was marching still going on. There was anti-war demonstrations going on. There was dealing with loss in families. The end of the first act is absolutely one of...
It's okay, because I do the same thing every time I talk about this one.
One of the most difficult songs. I have tried to sing it and I cannot. And it's Hey Mama. And it closes out our first act. It's not a song I would applaud, just from my perspective. And the young gentleman that is doing it has just suffered loss.
He has.
So I'm feeling for him a bit today because he was not at our rehearsal last night for a very important reason. Also, civil rights. Slavery is a huge part of this. And the fact that well over half of the signers of the Declaration of Independence were slave owners at the time, including our future first president and our future third president. If you listen to that and look at it in a historic perspective, it really makes this musical a whole lot more important that way. Parallels South Pacific with some of the stuff that was brought up there. So it's something, you know, but that's what I do. I look for that kind of stuff to make it interesting. So it's
one thing also that's interesting, and the social aspects and everything is they really are just incredibly important, and the way they're presented is very unique, I think, in many ways as well. But one thing that I found very interesting about this show, and I keep hearing it on some different sources I've had, is it's also unique as a musical. It has, somewhat famously, the longest amount of time between songs in musical history.
Don't ask why we chose that one to do with the symphony. But that's true. There is one book scene that is almost 35 minutes long.
Yeah, it's actually, depending upon the show, the production, yeah, it's at least that probably. So, but it's very unique in that way, and for good reason, to be honest, of what's going on. So it is a unique musical. As much as it is classic, it's also unique in some of its format, the way things kind of come in as well. So it's one of the reasons I really love the show, is that it blends classical musicals, plays themselves, as well as the leading into a modern musical in a way that most musicals can't.
One of the things that those of you that are familiar with the show probably know that there was a movie made of this. The movie was released in 1972, and many of the original Broadway stars were in the movie, and at the time they weren't necessarily headliners, big stars, which of course the studio in Hollywood was concerned about, but because the producers and the director, who was the same director that did the Broadway, had enough influence to be able to say, no, we want to use these people. Because of that, in my opinion, it is one of the more successful transfers to film of any movie musical. The cast that was in it, more than half of the cast was from the original Broadway production, which is very cool. So, for those in the room that may not be quite as intimately familiar, the show itself starts early May 8th, with John Adams. Oh, by the way, I gave you their character names, but I'm assuming everybody knows Keith Thompson, and Lynn Dixon, and Jason Gilbert up here. Familiar faces.
Cheyenne's got decidedly lighter in facial hair.
Yes, the entire cast has been stripped except me.
That could be arranged.
I know. Yes, for those of you that you've never seen some of these people without, it's been a long time. But of course, men at the time, it was not a thing. So, and just wait till you see them in the powdered wigs. It's really good. Yes. So, the show opens with John Adams, who is the main narrator character of the show. When they wrote the show, they decided to make Adams the focal point, and he is the instigator, amongst other things,
You mean his cousin Sam?
well, Sam was worse. I mean, those of you that are students of history, Samuel Adams was definitely a firebrand. He was regarded as more so than John, but Sam isn't in this show. Maybe that's a good thing, because both of them would have been overwhelming, I think. So we started mid-May, and at that point in time, there had been no official resolution or anything. There was lots of talk of independence. Concord and Lexington had happened almost a year earlier, so they were talking around the subject. The New England states, in particular Massachusetts, was the hotbed of we have to dissolve this connection with England. The other colonies not so much so, and to a variety of degrees. So the show starts with, we're not talking about a declaration, we're talking about arguing with each other about whether we should or shouldn't, and the Congress at that point is pretty evenly divided, wouldn't you say? In fact, most of the votes that you'll see happen during the show are kind of evenly split 6 and 6, with New York abstaining courteously. If you come see the show, you will understand that particular reference. And then New Jersey isn't represented at the beginning of the show, and I'm not going to tell you why that was, but if you research Sir Franklin's son, you will understand a little bit why New Jersey was absent at the moment. So the show opens with John Adams basically just lambasting the rest of the members of Congress about what they aren't doing that he wants them to do. And historically, the show, of course, takes a little bit of literary license, but mostly it is based on fact. In fact, many of the quotes, many of the letters that were read were literal missives that took place and were sent. Sherman Edwards used a collection of letters from Abigail Adams that he had access to at one of the libraries in New Jersey to help him in the creation of the original book. So that part is pretty cool. So we have some people on stage that weren't actually signers of the Declaration, and there are many people that were signers that are not represented in this show. So the writers took some liberties with who they included in the script, and they painted a few of the characters on our stage in a slightly different light than historically they actually were. My friend John Dickinson here is the foil to Adams' passion, not because he doesn't believe in the cause, but he's not ready to leave jolly old England. And the actual Dickinson was in a slightly different place than that, realistically. Do you want to?
Sure. John Dickinson, actually probably two of the characters that get the poorest treatment by the writing and the musical are Judge Wilson, who was a very vocal, very strong speaker, a writer, a contributor to the Constitution when it was written. Dickinson was the writer of the Articles of Confederation. So these are two very strong men who were not necessarily considered patriots because they thought there was another way. They thought there was still time. Dickinson wrote several very poignant letters to the king, reprimanding him for the treatment and asking for reconciliation and representation as they move forward. And so in the show, Judge Wilson is represented as very weak, which is not true in any historical thing I've ever read about Judge Wilson.
Correct.
He served later on in multiple capacities and later was on the Supreme Court.
Yeah, until he went to debtor's prison.
Yeah, he was a terrible businessman. There was no question about that. He fled 2 or 3 of the states because his business acumen was horrible. Dickinson, on the other hand, his property is still in use. He founded John and Mary College, but that was going to be confusing with William and Mary. So now you know it is Penn State University. And some of that campus is still on John Dickinson's property. But in the show, his point is that this young pup of John Adams is just agitated. He just is so insistent on rebelling. And the middle age for most of these characters was in their 40s.
Yeah.
So they had just got to the point where they're established, they have property, they returned, they have their law degrees, and a lot of them, in like Dickinson's case, he just wanted to settle down and enjoy the things that he's finally got established, as opposed to get into a war. But he's used as the villain, the antagonist in the show, because he does not want to fight. The ironic part is Dickinson ends up the only one who actually fought in the war. Several others served in desk positions, but he served as a private and wouldn't accept any advancement. In fact, later on, he was voted as the president of Delaware, and it was a unanimous vote except for his own. He was the only negative vote for voting for him to be in that position. So his character in real life is very different. I portray this kind of I'm the other form of annoying from John Adams. I poke at him and I prod at him and I really kind of assassinate his character. Is what he's trying to do is just breed violence.
And then you have a song.
Yeah, and so then the song, which I don't think you mentioned, was left out of the movie for political reasons.
That's correct.
Cool, Considerate Men talks about not moving forward, being relaxed, taking It's probably the only 1969 song about peace that doesn't have anything to do with peace.
Actually, represented up here, we have two of the people that were on the, no, let's hold back. And then we have our pirate friend, the firebrand, who is...
Spent his time pouring gas.
Yes, and actually, Stephen Hopkins actually, I believe, had some privateer background.
He was a privateer for England, oddly enough. And later, the Chancellor of Brown University, which was not known as Brown at the time. But it's a remarkable thing about all of these characters is they were all Renaissance men. It's not enough, okay. My own character was a privateer. He was governor of Rhode Island 3 or 4 times. It was either him or Dawes, who was the other representative from Rhode Island in Philadelphia. And they were political rivals for over a decade. He also was he ran a foundry. Probably a better businessman than Wilson.
Definitely.
But there was an edge to most all of these men. They didn't maybe have the global perspective that Dr. Franklin did because they didn't spend much time overseas, but they did what they needed to do at home to make a living, and you referred to that. So I think it's, he's crusty. Hopkins is crusty, and I think relishes that, or at least the character does in the show. But I think the individual, I tease Sean, people say, well, how come he asked you to do that? I said, well, he called me and said he was looking for somebody who was old and cranky.
That's true.
So maybe it's typecast.
They could also sing Like a Dream. So there was one more point to that. So let's delve into the story just a little bit more. We've got Dickinson on one side and the conservatives, who our current understanding of that word isn't quite right compared to what we have in the show. Conservative in this case meant not ready to go towards revolution, not ready to declare independence.
There were some hardline loyalists. Hardline
definitely.
loyalists.
Yeah. Actually, I think Samuel Reed was actually one of those.
Rutledge was borderline.
Yeah, my sense, and I haven't studied Rutledge's character. My sense of Rutledge, and I haven't studied the actual person as much on this one, but my sense of his character is that it's not so much he was opposed, but he cared so much about life in the Carolinas that he didn't want their peculiar institution, to use the historical language of the time, their adopted and cherished way of life to be disrupted.
My character said, you can't tell them apart.
Yeah, and at the time, the maps probably couldn't either.
Right.
There was certainly a divide personally between these men, and even amongst representatives from the same state. One of the things that happens in the show is that Caesar Rodney and Colonel Thomas McKeon from Delaware are firebrand type patriots, whereas George Reed, who was the third representative, was absolutely on the other side of the coin. So, not to give away the plot too much, but when Caesar Rodney had cancer, he was 41 years old.
Cancer to the face.
In the show, Caesar Rodney leaves to go back to Delaware because of his illness, and that leaves Delaware's delegation split down the middle, knowing that they couldn't get the vote that they would need when the time came. So we've talked quite a bit, and maybe haven't said anything yet. So are there folks out there that would like to chime in or have questions? Or yes?
I have a question. I was always curious and I'm a huge fan of the musical, but I was always very curious as to why the musical's depiction of John Adams was one of being, quote, obnoxious and disliked. When, if you read the fantastic biography of John Adams by David McCullough, John Adams was not disliked. In fact, he was very well respected amongst all members of the Congress. So, any idea why the producers or the creators of the musical chose to display him in a way that was really kind of off the mark?
My own take on this is that they chose to write a little bit of his brother Sam into John. Okay. Keith, do you have any further insight on this?
Well, I think some of it too is it comes a lot to just building a show. When you are building a show, you need, your drama, and all the things that you need with it, and that kind of comes into play with John. To put him out kind of on an island of his own amongst the whole group, it provides a lot more drama that way. But that was John Adams also, as much as he was liked, but not necessarily in meeting times. I know even during the, like Samuel Chase, and everyone loves attorneys, right? But that's one of the things that I think part of it though was for him, that during these times of debate, which he was very passionate about, that's what you're getting more out of. I don't think it's necessarily that he's not well liked, it's showing his passion, and he just takes it to an extreme, which is a lot of Samuel as well. And so it's not necessarily that.
They've taken a lot of what I would refer to as persistence and compounded it into annoyance. And if you, in the show, when you hear some of the things that are real proposals, real resolutions, the things that these states are together dealing with as a whole is so painfully monotonous. I mean, whether or not a donkey that died while moving luggage may or may not be compensated, the owner may or may not be compensated because they were really sure if the donkey died while he was carrying the luggage or happened to pass conveniently after. I mean, these are the stuff that that there was so little power in those aggregated states that the things they were left to decide was painfully monotonous. So the fact that Adams kept returning to, we need to be independent, we need to go, it was persistent to the point where in other stuff I've read, he was annoying.
And it makes for a much more enjoyable opening number. Because literary license is a thing, and they were trying to craft a show that would sell. And actually in the previews, it wasn't all that well received, but by the time it hit Broadway, I think the time was right, and that's
There's no love triangle. There's none, and many of the great musicals of that decade and previously all had a love triangle. There's a lot of hate, but it's what they describe the best, or is it you that says it, Jeff? This is a new breed. It's not Englishmen, it's Americans, and
we're a new people. We will require a new nation, I think is your line. Is that right, Jeff? And if you guys don't know, our friend Jeff Tish here is Benjamin Franklin. And yes, we're putting lots of familiar faces on stage. And that is one of the most important lines, in my opinion, in the show, because he is finally saying, this is actually why, this is what, I think that line happens when they're actually defending the creation of the document. Is that right, Jeff? I think.
Yeah. Well, it's in the argument of being an Englishman or not being an Englishman.
In response to this guy's saying we need to, why now? I think is what leads into that particular question. So throughout the course of the show, We travel from May 8th at the very beginning to, of course, July 4th at the end. Now, to go to the historical perspective for a moment, not everyone that signed the declaration did so on July 4th. That's the date that most of this is assigned to, but some of them weren't there in the room at that moment in time. So of all, how many total signers, Keith, you would know this?
We were just talking.
Yeah, so it was only about 3 or 4 on the 4th. It was actually very few. Most of them signed closer to the end of July, August, is when most of that happened. A lot of it because of what was going on with, as you even get into the show, which I appreciate, life is happening. These people, I think that's one of the best things about this show to me, is that we get to see that these people aren't just put up on the pedestal per se. We get to see there's life about them. They're real people. They were people that were dealing with life at home, life that was personal things, whatever, and you get just a taste of some of it, maybe not always the most accurate, but pretty darn close to that. Life was happening, and it was a group of people that did this, not some magical thing that just happened.
Yeah. It's another line. Franklin has the best lines in the whole show. Franklin and Adams, but Franklin, speaking to what you just said, when Adams is worried about what history will think, Franklin says, what will they think we are, demigods or something? We're men, no more or less, trying to create a country under lesser odds than a more benevolent God would allow, or something.
More generous God.
A more generous God would allow. Sorry, I haven't learned the script very well.
We have a script.
I do have a script, but trust me, I don't have it, that close.
We're men, no more nor less, trying to get a nation started. Sorry.
We all have moments like that.
We all have moments like that in the show.
Against greater odds than a more generous God would have allowed. Yeah.
Yep.
And it says first things first, independence and America. For if we don't secure that, what difference will the rest make?
He says that right after he says to John Adams, I'm sorry, John, but the slavery clause has to go. That was the final sticking point. Because the South was not going to move forward on independence with that clause in the Declaration. And that's the final argument that Adams and Franklin have. And it's kind of a doozy, actually. And they're doing it so incredibly well.
And they did, in the storyline, that was all said in front of the seated men in the Congress.
Yes. So, other questions, other thoughts, what about?
56 who signed.
56 total signers. It seems to me that Hancock signed on the 2nd, or the 1st, July 1st or 2nd? The 2nd. His was the first signature, and I think historically it was on July 2nd. And then, so the actual resolution was adopted, I believe, on that day. Anybody? You guys have something you want to add here? Let me tell you a little bit about our cast and our show. Of course, we are so thrilled to have the Cheyenne Symphony Orchestra as our pit. We are doing this show in concert format. So there will be some differences compared to what those of you that are used to going to see musical theater are going to notice. The orchestra is on stage with us, and this music is very orchestral, and I'm incredibly excited. We've got an orchestra of about 42 people. Great players. You're going to know most of them that are up on stage. Our concertmaster, Sam Jarvis, this time, has a couple really delightful solos in the song that Martha Jefferson sings about her husband. They dance and stuff, which is fun. So one of the most unusual things about this show is the original cast was 25 men and 2 women. Abigail Adams and Martha Jefferson are the only 2 female characters represented in the show. I've made more than one quip about the fact that if there had been some women in the room, things would have run much smoother. I have no doubt of that, actually. But the cast, the original cast, was 25 men and the two women characters. We've trimmed back just a tiny bit. We only have 23 people in our entire cast. And so we've got, we did combine one congressional member, but I'm not going to tell you who that was. You have to figure it out yourself. And we've got talent, of course, from Cheyenne, from people that have been on the Little Theater stage many times over the years. We've got folks that have performed and are regulars down at Candlelight Dinner Theater. We've got a couple folks that have been with Boulder Dinner Theater or Upper Colorado. And we have one true professional in the cast, the man sitting right here, Mr. Lynn Dixon, who of course spent more time on the boards professionally than the rest of us have had any time at all.
I don't know, there's some Little Theater people that have been on the boards a lot.
Yeah, they don't get paid. For those of you that don't know, Lynn toured with Phantom for many, many years. How many years?
Off and on the better part of a decade. But you reach a point where you're saturated.
Yes.
So I did 5 years with the tour here and about almost 3 years in Europe with Phantom, which was an interesting experience, and I'm grateful for it. It also gave me, as did this vehicle for many of the original cast. Ken Howard was the original Jefferson.
Yes.
You might know him from White Shadow on TV and some other things. He's become the HGTV movie guy now. William Daniels, Jefferson. Howard De Silva was his, or Franklin. And if those of you who have opportunity to tour the Franklin Museum in Philadelphia, the videos in there are all narrated by Howard De Silva. And you'll see him as Franklin and some of them as you go through the museum. So it created entire careers for some really well-known movie, theater, and television.
It was Betty Buckley's first show.
Betty Buckley's very first show. Yep.
So when you consider that, we come back to the time, Jason. 69 was a pivotal year, not only in theater, but in our country.
I really think that timing is why the producer at the time picked it up finally, because of what was going on socially in the country at the moment. Jason's point about, and actually Keith's as well, about the real lives that these men and women had. The way the storytellers for this show portray the relationship between John and Abigail. Abigail was back at the farm in Braintree. She was trying to keep the entire family, the whole brood, plus the farm. She was doing all of that work, and while John was stuck in foul-feeded, filthy, something or other. I don't know the songs either. Philadelphia. So the way the script writers dealt with this is that Abigail appears in John's mind. They're writing letters back and forth to each other, but John goes to that place in his head or in his memory where he's communicating with Abigail. So they're never seen actually together on stage. There is some distance between them, and they're in their own space, communicating back and forth by letter, as it were. And that's the way the songs between the two of them are done. And they're very poignant moments, honestly. Our Abigail is a wonderful young graduate student, did her undergrad at Ithaca and is down in Colorado right now, working on a master's degree in voice, doing a terrific job. Christy Shuck, thank you. And then many of you will be familiar with our Martha Jefferson, who is Janet Weisbrook, who has been on our Cheyenne Little Theatre stages many times. So, and is the choir teacher at South High School. So those two are the calming and or exciting influences, depending on whether you're Jefferson or Adams. You'll have to come see the show to know what I'm talking about on that statement. And then the rest of the cast, we've got such talent on this stage. I can't even begin to tell you, and I'm so excited about it. What else? What else would you like to know?
Other than 44 years ago, the professional sang at our wedding.
I sang for Sean.
Jeff?
First wedding, that was the first wedding I sang for after coming to Cheyenne.
You might want to talk about the staging and.
Oh yeah, I started to go into that. So we are doing this show in concert. Originally, I was thinking we would be up there with music stands and the orchestra would be there and we'd sing the songs and we'd read the dialogue and we would do it truly in concert. Well, because I have no sense whatsoever, and because I have amazing friends who are willing to do yeoman's work,
I think
it's not a shock.
It's a confession.
It is a confession.
No sense at all.
No sense at all. So, because of that, this show will look a little different to the audience because we've only had 5 rehearsals. A normal musical would be about 9 weeks of every night, over and over again, repetition, building in the characters, building in the movement, building in the blocking, building in sets. We don't really have sets except one amazing piece that Jeff made for us that you get to see on Thursday night. Jeff and Dale put together our voting board and it's fabulous. The actors are going to have script prompts. This show is not memorized. So Jeff, hold up your script prompt. That's Jefferson's.
I will be handling this the entire show.
Yes. So
That's what
All my
live.
notes, my cues, and all my lines.
yeah.
I'm going to give Jeff credit though. I printed mine all in 16-point type.
I have a bigger book, but
I do. Mine's all on parchment like his, but it's a single page at a time, and each page only has about 6 lines on it. So it's so I can read it. Sean was talking about preparation. That's what Little Theater does. It's enormous preparation. And my wife has often said, well, will I see you for the next 2 months? Not many times. And I've only directed 2 works for Little Theater. But in the professional sense, principal artists in a musical go into rehearsal 8 weeks before they do previews, which are not opening night. Those are the shows prior to opening night to see what works and what doesn't. The ensemble comes in 5 to 6 weeks earlier, and all of them are working 8 to 12 hours a day, 5 days a week, to get that production to where it looks like they've been doing it their entire lives. So there's an enormous commitment on the part. The fact that this has come together as well as it has. Mary asked Jeff and I before we started, and Keith was sitting there as well, how did it go? And we did last night, because we had a rehearsal yesterday. And I said, well, we learned a lot. And I think that's true. We learned we can do this.
And they added choreography, which I'll apologize for now.
Yeah.
I'm not dancing. Neither will.
Yes, you are. I've said multiple times, don't ever do a musical in 5 days.
No.
But I also said to the entire cast last night, we did about 10 hours yesterday at the Civic Center, and I do need to give a shout out to the City of Cheyenne and the Cheyenne Civic Center for being part of our sponsors for this, and yesterday for Chris Muggenberg, who is the technical director, and Sheila Brinkerway, were there all day so that we could be in this space yesterday and get so much of this work done. But I said to the cast last night, this is insane that we've tried to do this, but I can't think of any group that I would rather try to do this with, and I'm into that. They're amazing, truly amazing. Yeah. So you are going to see actors that are going to have maybe a journal or some parchment or something in hand because it's not memorized. Most of the songs are mostly close-ish. But the script, and there is a lot of dialogue in this show. One of the things that is going to be a little tricky because the orchestra is on stage with us. And unfortunately, there is about a 35-minute segment in the first act that they're going to sit there and not play. And that never happens with the symphony players. And we're a little nervous about that part. Although I didn't tell you this, but I asked Kyle to give monitors upstage to the orchestra so they could at least hear what's going on, because if they can't hear the dialogue, then they're truly going to get bored. So it will look a little different. We are going to use costumes, however, because for this story, the dress really does make a difference, and especially for if we've got children, which I hope we do have young people, families, young children perhaps, come see the show. It's a little long. It's going to be 2.5 hours, just like a standard Broadway musical of the time. But the costumes allow our memories and our thoughts to build the sets that are not there, to imagine what the heat that we're talking about in Philadelphia under the stage lights, it's going to not have to be faked, I'm afraid. And I do have to give a huge shout out to Travis Kirchhofer, who many of you know. Excuse me, Travis is the current president of Cheyenne Little Theatre Players. Excuse me, he's done yeoman's work putting all the costume stuff together because I lost my costumer like 5 weeks ago. So we have put this together by hook or by crook, and Travis has done a huge amount of work on costumes. We've pulled them from sources in Colorado, we've ordered them from Amazon, we have borrowed sticks and canes and wigs. Little Theater has provided all the resources that they had, but dress of this area is not something that you come by just by going to your closet. Thank God. So Travis has done a huge amount of work to make that part happen. What else? What haven't we talked about? There are a number of solos in the show. John Adams has a couple. The 11 o'clock number, those of you from classical Broadway, the 11 o'clock number for this show is a solo done by John Adams, basically asking the question, is anybody there? Is anybody listening to me? Does anybody share the same vision that I have? And that it literally was the 11 o'clock number back in the day. It's a powerful, powerful solo. And our gentleman that is playing Adams, Jonathan Hendrickson, is a general music teacher down in Colorado. Responded to the call for auditions that we put in, and beautiful voice, and is doing a terrific job. He's a little young for Adams.
We'll work on
Personally, he's not in his 40s, he's in his 30s, but he's still doing a terrific job with that. So he's got a couple of the big solos. The show is unusual in another aspect in that there's really no chorus, as it were. Congress is the chorus, but they only have one number, and it's the opening number.
It's the operatic version, or it's the musical theater version of Tosca. The chorus sings first and goes
And then goes away. But see, those people got paid, and then they could walk out the doors. This Congress has to sit there and talk to each other for the next 2.5 hours.
Opera choruses love Tosca. They get paid for a full show, but they're done after the first 10
There you go. So we've got those numbers. Then there is another group number called We'll Consider Men that Jason mentioned, and that's the one that Jesse's making him dance. It wasn't my fault.
After 35 minutes of, because it's this long, yeah, it breaks up the 35 minutes.
We really do need
So
it
you
there.
need something.
Yeah, we really do need it there. So we've got that group number of the quote-unquote conservatives, as it were. You're in that number too, aren't you?
No.
I
So as Sean has been paying attention, totally took a shot. Because he keeps putting me in it, and I'm not. That's one of the, actually, about this is, again, people leave for different reasons, as we've talked about before.
There are necessary reasons.
There are necessary reasons, like, Keith, you better be off stage for a while, which is great. But no, it is one of those, if anything, I think that's one of the things I would actually emphasize with this particular show. You get a chance to hear about a lot of people with the Declaration that we don't necessarily get to think about much with the Declaration. And what I love about this is that you get just a little bit into who they are, but I encourage everybody to take a chance. I mean, and we know Jefferson, Adams, and Franklin, ones that we tend to hear a lot about in American history. These others also take some chance if you can afterwards, take the program, look through it, find out a little bit more about these people. A lot of these people shaped our nation just as much. In many ways, and especially now that you would have probably never thought of, that's something I love about my character, is later on in life, he and Jefferson, but they, especially when Jefferson was president, but he chastened ended up being on the Supreme Court, and he's the only Supreme Court justice to have ever been impeached. And because of what happened during that, it's pretty much set up where our Supreme Court is now in terms of judges and the way things work. And it's very appropriate for this time period now, especially when we talk about our judicial systems and when we hear about things. So learning about all these different characters and what they meant is really something that this library is a good place to learn a lot from for that. So yeah, it would be really, I encourage.
Sean, in light of Keith's comments, there's a brand new book out about James Wilson called Forgotten Patriot. And it's getting a big buzz, so.
And just for the record, we've had the reference to Mr. McCullough's book on Adams, which I recommend wholeheartedly. If it weren't for John and Abigail Adams, this musical would not have existed, as well as a number of other things like the mini-series on Adams. But ladies, these men would not have been who they were without the women they were married to. And I can kind of testify to that because my wife maintained the house while I was on the road, sometimes 50 weeks out of 52, here in Cheyenne. So I sensed that with Adams, with Jefferson, some of the others, that if it weren't for the women, this wouldn't have happened because the men would have dissolved in just to a huge dogfight. But the home front kept it stable.
On a personal note, I'm a child of the Cheyenne Music and Arts education system, community. This show checks a last box for me. Lynn is the only voice teacher, music teacher that I haven't performed with yet. So in my music education history, I've either been able to sing at a concert with or perform on stage with all of my teachers, voice teachers. And so it really speaks to what Cheyenne does for arts and music. And
For the record, when I came to Cheyenne, Sean was a freshman in high school.
So that means only you are
And you called me, what can I say?
But it just, a huge amount of gratitude for me that the arts community has allowed me to do that there's backing for that in this community. But that's a big deal for me, to be able to perform with every single one of my music teachers or music coaches or voice teachers throughout, that's a big deal. So,
Here's to education in Cheyenne.
All right, we are just about at time. Are there any other questions, any thoughts, anything else you would like to know?
The show told them what it is and how much it costs and.
Oh, yeah. By the way, we've talked about some heavy topics, but the show is a musical comedy. So there is as much levity as there is seriousness in this show. And I think you will if you don't know the show, if you've never seen the movie, I think you're going to be delighted by the writing,
When is it again?
by the delivery.
When are we doing that?
Thursday night,
What time?
7 o'clock, Cheyenne Civic Center, $10, no fees. And this is a great moment for me to highlight Nathaniel's release, who is at the back of the room right now, is the chairman of the mayor's committee for Cheyenne 250, and is the person that Lindsay threw me under the bus about to be part of this committee, and I haven't said thank you, so thank you, because I mean that. The last 2 years, we've been at this for 2 years. Nathaniel's been at it for 2 full years, and I came on kind of early in the process. And you have no idea the amount of work that he and that committee have done in preparation for what's happening over the next 5 days. So Nathaniel, thank you. And to the Cheyenne Symphony, who is our major host for this, Lindsay and her staff have done amazing work to put this orchestra together. So, one more time, CheyennePresents.com is the website you need if you're going to buy tickets in advance. They are literally $10. It is general admission. The show starts at 7, so if you want a better seat, however you define that, get there a little early. I'm pretty sure the doors are opening at 6. Okay, so it is general admission, lobby, or not lobby, balcony and main floor. $10 anywhere you can find your seat. You can get them at the door as well, or you can go to the box office and grab them during box office hours. I do want to give a shout out also to the events on July 4th, because we have people in this room involved in other things. 9 a.m., and Nathaniel, you may have to help me here, 9 a.m., Saturday morning, July 4th, the parade will be downtown. It's taking a modified Christmas parade route, so it will not be starting at the Capitol, it'll be starting on 18th. 18th and Cary, it goes up Cary, it cuts across 22nd, comes back down Central, and then it goes back out on 17th, I believe. So that's a 9 a.m. parade. It should last about 75 minutes total. We've got the high school marching band, so we have a lot of military vehicles, sponsors. It should be a delightful parade, so we would encourage you to do that. That's at 9 a.m. The governor's proclamation in front of the Capitol is at 1 p.m. There is a show happening in the Capitol Auditorium, which if you've never been to the Capitol Auditorium, you go underground, and then you wind your way somewhere between the Capitol building and the Hirschler building. Thank you. And that show is called Suddenly...
The Remarkable.
The Remarkable, sorry.
And it stars Brenda Little, as we all know is an extraordinary actress, and it's the story of the trial of Susan B. Anthony, who was actually tried and convicted of voting.
Right. Judy's also in it. So 3 o'clock in the Capitol Auditorium. Judy Schultz is also in that cast. Is anybody else in the room in that cast? That's at 3, and is that a ticketed or a free? Free. There's also a speaker series going on at the Capitol throughout the afternoon. We would encourage you to do that. There will be food trucks all on Capitol Avenue.
Yes,
I think.
between 24 and 27.
Okay, there will be an entertainment stage set up north of the Supreme Court building throughout the day, culminating in Jelon Crossland singing from 7:30 until 8:30, and then the Cheyenne Symphony and Chorus will be presenting a concert starting at 8:30, set up right in front of the Capitol building on Capitol and 24th. That starts at 8:30. We'll play for about 55 minutes or 60 minutes or so, and then fireworks will be the last 20 minutes or so from about 9:40 until 10 o'clock. So, huge celebration in downtown Cheyenne all day Saturday, July 4th. We would love to have every one of you there and bring all your friends and enemies and pets and everything else and join us for a spectacular Capital City celebration. There is a website,
Capital City Celebration.
I just said it, CapitalCityCelebration.com has the entire schedule, all the events, everything that's going on. Thank you, everybody, for being here. If you have questions for any of these folks or Jeff about the show, I'm sure they'll be happy to talk to you for a few more minutes. Keith and Lynn and Jason, thank you for joining me. Lindsay, thank you for setting this up, and thanks to the Laramie County Library for hosting this event. Thank you.